The air in my workshop, or what passes for one these days, always tasted like stale coffee and regret. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight slicing through the grimy window, illuminating the organized chaos of my exile. Beakers, long since scrubbed clean of anything incriminating, lined the shelves. Scraps of paper, covered in equations I'd long since abandoned, lay scattered across my workbench. It had been 3 years since the incident, 3 years of keeping my head down, my skills buried, my name a whispered cautionary tale in certain circles. A sharp rap on the door shattered the quiet. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor or the insistent pounding of a delivery driver. This was authoritative, precise. My gut clenched. I wasn't expecting anyone. I smoothed down my worn sweater, a futile attempt to appear less derelict. Through the peephole, a sharp suit stood on my porch, his face impassive. He didn't look like law enforcement, not exactly. Too polished, too corporate. "User vo?" he asked, his voice smooth, devoid of emotion. I hesitated, then unlocked the deadbolt. "That's me." He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he produced a slim black folder. "I represent a consortium. We have a unique situation, one that requires a unique skill set." My eyebrow, I felt, must have risen. "Unique situation. I'm retired." "Your reputation precedes you," the stranger said, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Even in your current capacity." He gestured vaguely towards my cluttered workshop. "We've been monitoring your work, your self-imposed isolation." That sent a chill down my spine. "They've been watching me. What do you want?" "A death," he stated, his tone matter of fact. "A very particular kind of death, one that defies conventional explanation. The authorities are stumped. They've reached out to us, and we, in turn, have reached out to you." He opened the folder. Inside were photographs. They were stark, clinical, and horrifying. The scene was sterile, yet the image radiated a disturbing wrongness. The victim. It was as if they'd been meticulously dismantled and reassembled by someone with a profound misunderstanding of anatomy. "This is the third one," the stranger said, his voice low. "All identical. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no discernible cause of death through standard means. Yet they are undeniably dead and rearranged." My breath hitched. My mind, despite years of deliberate suppression, began to whir. The precision, the sheer audacity. It spoke of a mind operating on a different plane, a mind that understood the human body in ways few ever would. "Where?" I managed to croak out. "The old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use," he replied. "They've kept it preserved, a testament to a bygone era. It's fitting, I suppose, given the nature of the work." The old county building morgue, I knew it. A relic. A place where the smell of formaldehyde clung to the very walls, where the stainless steel tables had seen more sorrow than most people could imagine. And the equipment. Primitive, yes, but reliable. No fancy digital readouts, just good old-fashioned mechanics and keen observation. A long-dormant spark. The thrill of the impossible, the allure of the puzzle. "Why me?" I asked, my voice gaining a fraction of its old strength. "Because," the stranger said, closing the folder with a soft click, "you were the best. We need someone who doesn't shy away from the macabre, someone who can see the patterns where others see only chaos." He slid a card across the worn surface of my workbench. It was plain white with only a name and a number. No company logo, no title. "When you're ready, the old county building morgue, the impossible deaths." I picked up the card, my fingers tracing the embossed lettering. My isolation was over. The reckoning had begun. The card felt slick and absurdly heavy in my hand. Thorn Industries. Thorn. The name itself was a cold, metallic echo from a life I tried to bury. My fingers tightened around the stiff paper, the embossed letters digging into my skin. This was no ordinary summons. This was a ghost, materialized from the ashes of my career. I was still in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, the air thick with the cloying scent of disinfectant and something else, something metallic and ancient. The single bare bulb overhead cast long, wavering shadows that danced with the swirling dust motes. The equipment here was a museum piece, A stainless steel autopsy table scarred with decades of use, a hulking, humming refrigeration unit that rattled like a dying beast, and a collection of instruments that looked more suited to a butcher's shop than a place of scientific inquiry. It was a stark contrast to the gleaming, sterile labs I'd once commanded. My mind replayed the brief, unsettling encounter with the man who'd left the card. He hadn't introduced himself, just appeared at the doorway of this forgotten place, a silhouette against the dim corridor light. His voice, a low rumble, had been devoid of emotion as he described the impossibility of the deaths. No trace of entry, no physical trauma, yet they're gone, utterly gone. He'd spoken of a pattern, a signature that defied logic, and then he'd uttered my name. User Vo. It was like a curse, a brand. Now standing here, the card a tangible link to a world I'd sworn off, a wave of nausea rolled through me. Thorn Industries, they were the monolith, the sprawling conglomerate that had once been my patron, my employer, and ultimately my undoing. Their name was synonymous with cutting-edge technology, with innovation that pushed boundaries, and with a ruthlessness that bordered on the sociopathic. My internal monologue was a frantic scramble. Why me? After everything, they wouldn't reach out unless this was something they couldn't handle themselves, something that needed my particular. My expertise had led to my disgrace, a miscalculation, a moment of hubris, a failed experiment that had cost lives and shattered my reputation. A sudden clang from the refrigeration unit made me jump. The sound echoed in the cavernous room, a jarring intrusion. I looked around, my eyes scanning the stark, utilitarian space. The air was frigid, biting at my exposed skin. Disgraced, reckless, dangerous. The stranger's words returned. We need someone who understands the unconventional. Unconventional, that was one way to put it. Another was catastrophic. The faint coppery tang in the air was a familiar, unwelcome companion. The deaths he described. No trauma, no entry. It sounded like something out of a nightmare or a particularly poorly written pulp novel. But Thorn Industries didn't dabble in fiction. Rumors of clandestine projects, of ethical lines blurred and then erased. They were always pushing the envelope, always seeking the next frontier, no matter the cost. And now they were calling me back. I had to know. I had to understand what had drawn their attention, what impossible puzzle they couldn't solve without dredging up the wreckage of my past. I pulled out my phone, the screen a blinding beacon in the dim light. The number on the card was a direct line, bypassing any switchboard, any gatekeeper. It spoke of urgency, of secrecy. My thumb hovered over the call button. Hesitation warred with a grim curiosity. This was a trap, I knew it. A gilded cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. Yet the scientist in me, the part that had never truly died, was already dissecting the problem, trying to find the flaw in the impossible. What kind of death leaves no trace? What force could achieve such a feat? I took a deep breath, the cold air doing little to steady my nerves. The weight of my past pressed down, but a new, more immediate tension began to build. The stakes had just been raised, and I had a sinking feeling that this was far more than just a case. This was a reckoning. My fingers finally pressed the call button. We have a situation, a rather unique one. The voice was smooth, practiced, but I detected an undercurrent of something else. Urgency, or perhaps fear. Meet me, the old Thorn Industries R&D facility, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Come alone. The line went dead, abandoned, some said. Others claimed it was still operational, hidden from public view. Either way, it was a place where I'd once spent countless hours, chasing the elusive edge of discovery. Now it was where my past and present were about to collide. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, hung thick and cold, a familiar chill that always settled in my bones. It wasn't the temperature, not really. It was the weight of it all, the silent stories etched into the stainless steel tables and the hum of ancient refrigeration units. Thorn Industries had chosen a suitably grim backdrop for our reunion. I'd arrived early, naturally. Punctuality was one of the few good habits I'd managed to cling to after everything. The voice on the phone hadn't identified itself, just the cryptic invitation. "We've been expecting my call." Who was we? And why the hell were they expecting my call? My reputation was less a reputation and more a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. The large, double doors of the morgue creaked open, admitting a figure silhouetted against the weak morning light filtering through grimy windows. It was the detective. He was taller than I remembered, with a stern set to his jaw that spoke of long nights and too many bad cases. He offered a curt nod, his eyes scanning me with an intensity that felt like an interrogation. "User Vo," he stated, his voice a low rumble. "They said I was the one to call." "They," I prompted, stepping further into the cavernous space. The smell of disinfectant and something metallic, something organic, pricked at my nostrils. It was a scent I knew intimately, a scent that had once been my life's work. "The ones who matter," the detective replied, his gaze not leaving my face, and I read the only one who can make sense of this. He gestured vaguely towards a covered gurney at the far end of the room. "We've had two, both unusual." Unusual was an understatement. The preliminary reports, the ones that had landed on my desk like ticking time bombs, spoke of victims found in secure locations, no signs of forced entry, and causes of death that defied conventional forensic explanation. Thorn Industries, a company that usually dealt in sleek, sterile innovation, was apparently involved in something far more visceral. The detective pulled back the sheet. My breath hitched. The victim was a man, middle-aged, dressed in the expensive suit I'd seen in the grainy surveillance photos. His skin had a peculiar, almost waxy pallor, and his eyes, wide and staring, seemed to hold a silent scream. But it wasn't the expression that stopped me. It was the mark. On his inner forearm, etched with impossible precision, was a symbol, a stylized helix intertwined with a single, perfect teardrop. I'd seen it before, in the periphery of my nightmares, in the faded photographs of my disgraced research. "I recognize it," the detective stated, not a question. "It's familiar." I managed, my voice a little rougher than I intended. My hands, I noticed, were trembling. I clenched them into fists, forcing the tremor to subside. "What was the official cause of death?" "That's the problem," the detective sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "The coroner's stumped. No trauma, no toxins, nothing. They just stopped like a switch was flipped." My mind raced, sifting through a library of forgotten knowledge, of theories I'd been forced to abandon. This wasn't a simple poisoning. This was targeted, precise. "The first victim?" I inquired, my gaze still fixed on the symbol. "Same mark, same cause of death. He was found in his locked apartment, no signs of entry." He paused, then added, "He worked for Thorn Industries, head of their bioengineering division." So not just Thorn Industries and their cutting-edge research. The pieces were starting to form a terrifying mosaic. And this one, I gestured to the body on the gurney. Also Thorn, senior research scientist, specializing in genetic sequencing. The detective's voice held a note of unease, the same lab as the first victim. I knelt beside the gurney, pulling on a pair of gloves from my kit. The air around the body felt strangely inert, devoid of the usual post-mortem processes. It was as if life had simply been extracted. I leaned closer, examining the symbol. It was too perfect to be a tattoo, too deliberate to be a random marking. It looked almost branded, but without any heat or scarring. "Did I find anything else?" I questioned, my eyes tracing the faint blue veins beneath the waxy skin. "Any anomalies? Anything out of place?" The detective shook his head. The place was spotless, almost too spotless, like it had been cleaned by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. That was another Thorn signature, their obsession with sterile environments. But this felt different. This felt like a message. As I worked, meticulously documenting every detail, a younger officer entered the room, his face pale. He approached the detective, speaking in a hushed tone. "Sir, there's a woman outside, says she has information, claims she saw something last night near the Thorn R&D facility." The detective's brow furrowed. "Who is she?" "Says her name is Anya. She's one of Thorn's security personnel." Anya, Thorn Industries Security, and she claimed to have seen something. This could be the break I needed, or it could be another carefully placed distraction. My gut, honed by years of dissecting the truth from lies, told me to be cautious. But my professional curiosity, that old, insatiable hunger for answers, urged me forward. "Bring her in," I said, standing up. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning within me. The symbol on the victim's arm felt like a brand, burning itself into my memory. This was no longer just a case. This was a descent into a darkness I thought I'd left behind. The old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, was just the beginning. The real investigation, the dangerous one, was about to start. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, hung thick and cold. It always did. But today it felt heavier, laced with a new kind of dread. I'd asked Anya, Thorn Industries Security, to meet me here, away from the sterile, watchful eyes of the corporate labs. The room itself was a time capsule. The stainless steel tables, scarred and dulled with age, gleamed faintly under the harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant, sharp and metallic, did little to mask the faint, underlying scent of decay. Anya arrived precisely on time, her Thorn Industries uniform a stark contrast to the faded linoleum floor. He was younger than I'd expected, her face a picture of anxious determination. Her eyes, darting around the room, betrayed a nervousness I recognized. I'd seen that look in the mirror more times than I cared to admit. "Thank you for coming, Anya," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. I gestured towards a worn metal stool. "Please sit." She hesitated, her gaze lingering on the trolley laden with instruments that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Is this?" "Sometimes," I replied, stepping closer to one of the tables. "It's a neutral space, away from observations." I let the implication hang in the air. Thorn Industries had eyes and ears everywhere. She finally sat, perching on the edge of the stool as if ready to bolt. I don't know if I should be here, user vo, they told me. "They told you to stay quiet," I finished for her. "I understand, but you saw something you believe is important." She nodded, her grip tight where she gripped her purse. "It was, during the last incident, at the research facility. I was on my usual patrol, Sector Gamma, near the loading docks. Loading docks, that was significant. The official reports placed the victim inside the main research wing, nowhere near the perimeter." "What did you see, Anya?" I pressed, leaning in slightly. "A vehicle," she said, her voice gaining a fraction of its strength. "Not one of ours, no markings, and then I saw someone get out." My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented details. A unmarked van, a clandestine meeting. This wasn't a random act of violence. "Can you describe this person?" It was quick, she admitted, frustration creeping into her tone. "The light wasn't good, but tall, and they were carrying something heavy, wrapped in a tarp, I think." A tarp, another detail that didn't fit the official narrative. The victim was found in the lab, apparently killed by an experimental device. No mention of anything being transported in or out. And what happened then? The van. It drove away, fast. I didn't think much of it at the time, just some late-night delivery maybe, but then, when I heard about what happened to the scientist, her voice trailed off, a shiver running through her. It clicked. It didn't make sense. How could someone get in and out without anyone seeing, unless they didn't have to get in? She looked at me, her eyes wide with a sudden horror. What if the accident wasn't an accident at all? My gut twisted. This was it. The confirmation I'd been searching for, the crack in Thorn Industries' carefully constructed facade. What if they were bringing something out? I murmured, the words tasting like ash, and the person I saw. I tried to report it, but my supervisor brushed it off, said I was seeing things, said I should stick to my patrol routes. That explained why she hadn't come forward sooner. She'd been shut down. The corporation was good at that. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Did you notice anything else about the van? A license plate? Any distinguishing marks?" I asked, my forensic mind already cataloging the possibilities. She shook her head. "No, it was too fast. Anya's account was a powerful piece of the puzzle, but it still left gaping holes. If someone was taking something out, what was it and why? And how did it tie into the victim's death inside the facility? "This is important, Anya," I said, turning back to her. "More important than you know. You did the right thing coming to me." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "But you need to understand. Thorn Industries is not going to be happy you're talking to me. They'll likely try to discredit you or worse." Her face paled, but she held my gaze. "I know, but I can't. I can't let this go, not after seeing what I saw." A flicker of respect ignited within me. He was braver than I'd given her credit for. "All right, we'll work this together, but we have to be smart. Every step we take, we need to assume we're being watched." I glanced at the trolley of instruments, a sudden thought striking me. "Did you see what the person was carrying? You said it was heavy, wrapped in a tarp. Could you tell the shape?" Anya frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "It was awkward, not like a box. More irregular, like a bundle of something, or a body." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A body. My mind flashed back to the preliminary autopsy report, the victim's injuries. They were severe, but not immediately fatal in the way the device suggested. What if the device was a cover? What if the victim was already dead when they were brought into the lab? This wasn't just about corporate espionage or a scientific accident. This was something far more sinister. I looked at Anya, her fear palpable but her resolve unwavering. He was a witness and now an unwilling accomplice. The stakes had just been raised, and I had a terrifying feeling I was walking into a trap, armed with nothing but the truth, and a deep, gnawing suspicion that the real horror was only just beginning. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, was thick with the cloying scent of formaldehyde and something else. Something metallic, coppery. It clung to the back of my throat, a constant reminder of where I was and why. The stark, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile, unforgiving glow on the stainless steel table. The sheet covering the victim felt impossibly heavy, a shroud not just for the dead, but for the truth I was desperately trying to unearth. "Anything, user vo." The voice of the coroner, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with weary resignation, cut through the silence. He stood by a cart laden with instruments, his movements slow and deliberate. I ran a gloved hand over the sheet, my fingers tracing the outline of the body beneath. The preliminary report still echoed in my mind. Severe injuries, but not the kind that would explain the swiftness of death, not without the device. The device. It was too neat, too convenient. A smoke screen. I was starting to believe. "The preliminary findings," I began, my voice a little rough. "They felt off. The device, it's almost too perfect a weapon for this scenario, like it was designed to mislead." The coroner grunted, a non-committal sound. He'd seen enough bodies, enough supposed causes of death to grow cynical. "We go by the evidence, user vo, and the evidence pointed to that thing. But what if the evidence was planted?" I countered, my gaze fixed on the sheet. What if the victim was already deceased when they were placed with the device? He paused, then sighed. "And the motive for that? Why stage such an elaborate scene?" "That's what I need to figure out," I admitted, pushing aside the sheet with a practiced, yet still unsettling motion. The victim lay before me, pale and still. The injuries were indeed significant, deep lacerations that looked like they'd been inflicted with something sharp and powerful. But the surrounding tissue, the bruising, it didn't align with the kind of trauma that would kill someone in minutes, especially not with the alleged cause of death. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning every detail. The skin was cool, but not the clammy cold of immediate death. There was a faint rigor mortis setting in, but it was inconsistent. Some areas were stiff, others surprisingly pliable. This wasn't the timeline of a single violent event. This was staged. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a patch of discoloration on the victim's forearm. "This bruising, it's too diffuse, too old. It looks like it happened days ago, not hours." The coroner squinted, moving closer. "Could be post-mortem lividity. Changes can happen." "Not like this," I insisted, my mind racing. This is pressure, and it's too localized. It's like they were restrained or held in a specific position for a long time. I then moved to the victim's neck, and here, there's a faint ligature mark, almost invisible. It's too thin, too precise for the device itself. My heart started to pick up its pace, a familiar, unwelcome thrumming in my chest. This was it. This was the disconnect I'd been sensing. The device wasn't the murder weapon, it was a prop. The real killing happened before. The preliminary report focused entirely on the device. I murmured, more to myself than to the coroner. It glossed over these other anomalies. I circled the table, my eyes darting from one detail to another. The victim's fingernails were clean, too clean. No signs of a struggle, no skin fragments, no fibers caught under them. If they had been attacked, especially with the ferocity suggested by the lacerations, I would expect some defensive wounds, some trace evidence. The report mentioned a secondary trauma to the skull, a blunt force impact. The coroner stated, flipping through his notes. Yes, but it was described as minor, almost incidental to the other injuries. I recalled. I gently prodded the area he indicated. There was a slight indentation, barely perceptible. It was too small to be the primary cause of death. Then my gaze fell upon the victim's left hand. Clutched tightly within it, almost hidden by the folds of the sheet, was a small, metallic object. It wasn't part of the victim's clothing or any of the standard equipment found in the morgue. I carefully pried open the stiff fingers. It was a USB drive, small, black, and utterly out of place. This was more than just a murder. This was a message. Someone wanted this victim dead, and they wanted it to look like a bizarre accident or perhaps a suicide. But they also wanted something else. They wanted me to find this. "What is that?" the coroner asked, his voice tinged with curiosity now. "I don't know yet," I replied, my fingers already working to detach the drive from the victim's grip. "But I have a feeling it's the key." I looked back at the victim, their eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. They weren't just a casualty, they were a messenger. And the message was far more complex and far more dangerous than I had initially imagined. The corporation. They were involved. This wasn't just about silencing someone, it was about controlling information. The scope of this conspiracy was widening, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The tension in the room, already palpable, ratcheted up another notch. I had a breakthrough, all right, a terrifying one. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, hung thick and cold, a tangible weight that pressed in on my lungs. Each breath felt like swallowing ice. The fluorescent lights above hummed a sickly, uneven tune, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every slight tremor of the room. I traced the faint outline of the victim's jaw with a gloved finger, the skin cool and unnervingly smooth. This was no random act. The precision, the almost surgical removal of specific tissues, it screamed a message, and that message was directed squarely at me. The corporation. Their reach was far longer, their methods far more brutal than I dared to imagine. This wasn't just about silencing a whistleblower, as the initial reports suggested. This was about control, about burying a truth that could shatter their carefully constructed empire. I moved to the stainless steel examination table, the cold metal biting through my lab coat. The victim's file lay open beside me, a thin barrier between the stark reality and the sterile procedures. Every entry, every notation felt like a taunt. They wanted me to see this. They wanted me to understand the stakes. He stood in the doorway, a hulking silhouette against the brighter corridor light. I hadn't heard him enter. My focus had been absolute, my senses hyper-alert, yet he'd still managed to surprise me. That was a new and unsettling development. "Just confirming my initial findings," I replied, keeping my voice even. I couldn't let him see the storm brewing inside me. The organ removal was deliberate, not for transplant, not for research as we know it. Something else. I let the implication hang in the air, watching his reaction. His expression remained impassive, a mask honed by years of confronting death, but a flicker in his eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw told me he knew more than he was letting on. "They're very thorough, these people," he murmured, stepping further into the room. He gestured vaguely towards the body. "Whatever they wanted, they got it clean." They. He'd used the pronoun. He knew who they were, or at least he suspected. "And you're okay with that?" I challenged, my voice sharper than intended. He met my gaze, his eyes holding a weary resignation. "My job is to document user vol, not to chase ghosts. The police are handling the external investigation. I'm just the man who puts the pieces in order if they can be found." He was right in a way, but the pieces weren't just for the police report. They were for me. They were the breadcrumbs leading to the heart of this conspiracy. I needed something tangible, something that couldn't be explained away by corporate lawyers and PR spin. A faint discoloration, almost a smudge, caught my eye near the base of the thumb. It wasn't blood, it looked chemical. I leaned closer, the hum of the light seeming to intensify. Using a sterile swab, I carefully collected a sample. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but I had to try. "What are you looking for now?" the chief asked, his voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "Just a trace," I said, sealing the swab in a sterile vial. Something the coroner's initial sweep might have missed. I didn't elaborate. He didn't need to know about the faint, almost iridescent sheen I'd detected under the morgue lights, a sheen that reminded me of the proprietary lubricants used in the corporation's advanced robotics division. He knew. He suspected, and he was doing nothing. Was he compromised or just afraid? Either way, I was on my own. I returned to the victim's personal effects, a small plastic bag containing a wallet, a few crumpled notes, and a single, nondescript key. The wallet yielded nothing of interest: standard identification, a few credit cards, a modest amount of cash. The notes were receipts, mundane purchases, but the key, it was heavy, solid, unlike any I'd seen before. It wasn't for a car or a house. It felt industrial. My fingers trembled as I examined the key more closely. There was a small, almost invisible etching on its head, a stylized hawk. I'd seen that symbol before in the executive suites of the corporation, emblazoned on private art pieces on the lapels of their most senior personnel. A shiver crawled down my spine. This was more than just a key. It was a pass. A surge of adrenaline, sharp and potent, coursed through me. I had to get this key analyzed, had to find out what it unlocked. But who could I trust? The chief medical examiner's passive complicity gnawed at me. My former colleagues at the lab were likely under surveillance, their loyalty bought or coerced. I pocketed the vial and the key, my heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, felt heavier now, charged with a new, terrifying urgency. I was no longer just investigating a murder. I was walking into a war. The message had been received. Now it was time to send my own. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, hung heavy and still. It always did, but tonight it felt like a shroud. The hum of the ancient refrigeration units was the only sound, a low thrum that vibrated through the linoleum floor and up into my bones. I ran a gloved finger along the cool, stainless steel slab, the same one where the stranger had lain just hours ago. My gaze drifted to the victim's hand, the one I'd been so focused on, the ring. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol, a very specific, very damning symbol. I remembered the first time I saw it on the finger of a man who was supposed to be dead, a ghost. He'd been a key witness, then a casualty, then a phantom. And now he was here. The ring, a heavy silver band etched with a stylized hawk, had been a detail I'd dismissed as personal affectation, but it wasn't. Not when I'd seen it again on the finger of the man who'd orchestrated his disappearance. The man who now sat across from me, bathed in the harsh, flickering fluorescent light of the autopsy bay. "I shouldn't be here, user vo," the stranger said, his voice a low growl that scraped against the silence. He wasn't in a suit and tie this time. He wore a dark, practical jacket, the kind of man might wear for a long night's work. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place: weariness perhaps, or a grudging respect. Neither should he. I countered, gesturing with my chin towards the sheet-draped form on the slab. He deserved better than this, and so do the others. My voice, surprisingly steady, echoed in the cavernous space. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, each scenario more dramatic than the last. But standing here with the smell of disinfectant and something far more unsettling in my nostrils, the reality was stark. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Deserved, we all get what we deserve eventually, some sooner, some later, some by their own hand, some by circumstances. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I was always good at seeing the details, user vo, the microscopic fractures, the faint traces, but I missed the big picture. I always did. That stung. It was a jab at my past, at the mistakes that had landed me here in this god-forsaken morgue, sifting through the debris of other people's lives. But it was also true. I had been so focused on the science, on the how, that I'd often overlooked the why. The big picture is staring me in the face, I answered, my gaze locking with his. It's the hawk. It's the pattern. It's the way I've been using people, discarding them like lab rats. He didn't flinch. Progress requires sacrifice, user vo. I of all people should understand that. I've made sacrifices, have an eye for my work, for results. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He knew. He knew about the incident, the one that had cost me everything. The pressure to deliver, the shortcuts taken, the catastrophic outcome. He was using my own failures as a weapon. This isn't about my past, I responded, forcing myself to meet his gaze, to hold it. This is about justice, about what I did to him, to the others. I took a step closer, my hand instinctively going to the pocket of my lab coat where I'd tucked the evidence, the data chip, the one that contained everything, the altered reports, the financial transactions, the coded communications. Justice is a luxury for those who can afford it. He added, his voice hardening. Those who stand in the way of necessary change often find themselves inconveniently removed. He stood then, a fluid movement that belied his age. The air crackled with an unspoken threat. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I knew this was it, the moment of truth. It's all here. I patted my pocket, the weight of the chip a comforting, terrifying presence. What good is proof when I read the only one who can read it, and who will listen to I, user vo, the disgraced scientist? The instruments of death, the tools of my former trade, were all around me. Scalpels glinted under the lights. Because this isn't just about me anymore, it's about them. I thought of the families, the unanswered questions, the gaping holes left in their lives. He stopped, his eyes narrowing. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of something in his gaze, doubt, regret. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that steely resolve. Then I've made my choice, he replied, his voice dangerously soft. He raised his hand, and in it I saw a glint of metal. Not a weapon, not yet, but a tool. A tool he knew how to use. This was it, the climax. The point where everything I'd worked for, everything I'd risked, would either come to fruition or shatter into a million pieces. I braced myself, my own hand tightening around the smooth, cool plastic of the data chip in my pocket. The truth, I realized, was a fragile thing, easily broken, but sometimes, just sometimes, it could be the sharpest weapon of all. The air in the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, hung heavy with the metallic tang of disinfectant and something else, something stale and final. I stood my ground, the echo of my own denial still ringing in my ears. He was wrong. He had to be wrong. The whole premise, the carefully constructed narrative they'd fed me, crumbled around me like dry plaster. My gaze swept over the stainless steel slab, the stark overhead lights glinting off the instruments laid out with unnerving precision. Scalpels, bone saws, forceps, they were ghosts of my past, each one a reminder of the work I'd done, the mistakes I'd made. The detective, his face a mask of professional detachment, watched me, his silence more potent than any accusation. I read wrong, I repeated, the words gaining a sliver of conviction this time. My voice still shook, but it wasn't from fear, not entirely. It was the tremor of realization, the violent jolt of understanding. The meticulous detail, the surgical precision of the murders. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about covering something up, something far more personal than any corporate espionage I'd imagined. I walked over to the heavy metal trolley laden with surgical tools. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth steel of a scalpel. This wasn't the work of a professional killer, not in the way we'd been led to believe. This was someone familiar with this room, with these tools, someone who knew how to operate here. The victim's body, I answered, my eyes fixed on the scalpel, was moved, significantly. The ligature marks on the neck are too clean, too uniform. And the internal damage, it's inconsistent with the external trauma. Detective shifted his weight. We accounted for that. The killer was skilled enough to perform a post-mortem on a moving victim. I scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet space. No, this wasn't about killing them. It was about making it look like they were killed. The staging, the timing, the choice of victims. It all points to someone with intimate knowledge of the corporation's inner workings. Someone who knew exactly who to target to create maximum disruption, and exactly how to make it look like a rival company's work. I picked up a sterile glove, its latex cool against my skin. The pieces, once scattered and incomprehensible, were beginning to click into place with a chilling finality. The seemingly random victims, the corporate espionage angle, the meticulous planning. They were about erasing evidence. Evidence of what asterisk? Not illegal research, not stolen patents, something far more human. I remembered the hushed conversations I'd overheard, the nervous glances exchanged between executives. I dismissed it as corporate jargon, but now, the corporation wasn't experimenting with new chemicals. I stated, my voice low and steady. They were experimenting with people, and these victims, they were the ones who knew, the ones who tried to blow the whistle. The killer isn't an outsider trying to destroy the company. The killer is an insider trying to protect it, or rather trying to protect themselves. The detective remained silent, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a dawning comprehension perhaps, or maybe just the reflection of the harsh lights. The evidence is circumstantial, user Vo, he responded, his tone measured. Circumstantial doesn't account for the specific type of anesthetic found in the victim's system. I countered, my mind racing. It's a proprietary blend developed by the corporation for experimental procedures. Procedures that would leave no trace if done correctly, and the killer was just cleaning up the mess. I gestured to the array of instruments. These aren't murder weapons. They are tools for disposal, for making a body disappear, or at least making the cause of death untraceable. The impossible murders were designed to look like the work of a rival, to trigger a corporate war, to distract from the real crime, the experiments themselves. I looked at the detective, my heart heavy with the weight of what I was about to reveal. And the person who knows all of this, the person who has the access, the knowledge, is someone very close to the top, a high-ranking executive, but we needed more. And the method disguised as something else entirely. I thought of my own fall from grace, the misplaced trust, the devastating consequences. This wasn't just about justice for the victims. It was about reclaiming my own integrity. I turned away from the instruments, the ghosts of my past receding. The sterile air of the old county building morgue, 1970s equipment still in use, no longer felt suffocating. I had found the truth, not just about the murders, but about the insidious nature of unchecked power. And in doing so, I had finally found my way back to myself. The resolution wasn't just about catching a killer. It was about rebuilding what had been broken, piece by painstaking piece.